Let us see if I can come up with an alternate arrangement through which I won't have to depend on the people. See, 9:45 is rather early. Generally, people in IISc come by around 9:30, 9:45. So probably this person also finds it a little difficult to be here by 9:30 or 9:45. So anyway, it was unfortunate. I'm sorry that I couldn't be here. Let us wait for a few more minutes and then get started with today's class.
Sir, they had asked me few doubts, so I cleared also. Maybe two doubts I was not able to clear. Maybe they can ask.
Okay. Well, can we reserve that to the end of the class because it's
Yeah, we
already
can do
10,
it.
2 minutes past 10. So in
Hmm.
3 minutes time, we will get started with today's lecture, and
Yeah, yeah.
definitely I can answer whatever they have towards the end of
Yeah,
the class.
one small question was there from Mukund that I think we can do in 2 minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
Mukund, you can proceed.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good
Uh,
morning.
sir, yesterday I was going through an article in Google. So it was written there that Newton-Euler equation can be applied only along the center of mass or on the center of gravity. So, sir, is it true or no?
Well, no, no, not really. You can, there are different versions of Newton-Euler's equations. The form of the Newton-Euler equation will not change if you write it about a fixed point O in space. That's also possible.
Okay, sir.
But uh, is it linear equations also? No, as far as translation equations are concerned, I think it is you write it only about the center of mass.
Uh,
Okay,
center of
for
mass.
rotation
Okay.
equations, as long as that either you write it about the point of axis of rotation, in which
Rotation.
case the form will be the same as that of what you would get when you write it about the center of mass. Otherwise, you can write it about the
Yeah.
center of mass. You have a choice there. But as far as
Okay.
translation equations are concerned, it is right. Newton's equations are written assuming that the whole rigid body can be lumped into a single point mass situated at the center of mass. So for translation, it is right. For rotation, you can write it about any axis. In fact, you can even write it about points that are moving in space, but then the form will not look the way it does right now. Some other extra terms will have to come in to make it consistent. That's it.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was having that doubt only.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. It is 5 minutes past 10. Let us get started with today's lecture. I have no particular announcements to make apart from the apology that I offered just some time back on my inability to have shown up at 9:45. Um, this tomorrow I will not be sending any homework. As per our agreement, it will be once in 2 weeks. So homework 3 itself will be due this Monday, and I will create the link for that and send it over to you guys this sometime during this weekend. And homework 3 will be due next Monday. Sorry, homework 4. And sometime next Thursday or Friday, I will send the next homework 5. I think beyond that, I have no housekeeping announcements to make. So let us get started with today's lecture. I'll just share the screen. Okay. Can all of you see my white sheet of paper?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let us get started. we will continue our discussion of dynamics of multi-body systems. I must have titled it. I could have been a bit more specific in connection with what we are discussing. What we are discussing is deriving the dynamics using Newton-Euler formulation. Okay, so we are using Newton-Euler's equations, applying them to each rigid body, drawing the free body diagrams, applying the Newton-Euler equations to each of the rigid bodies, and then putting them all together to come up with the overall dynamics of the multi-body system. So there is an alternate way to do this, which is what we will discuss in the next class. But perhaps this class, dynamics of multi-body systems, the Newton-Euler formulation. Okay, so this is the technique we are using to obtain the dynamics. So by way of recap, in the previous lecture we explored the properties of homogeneous transformation matrix of T of B relative to A, and subsequently we talked about the notions of forward kinematics, what does it mean, and inverse kinematics. So forward kinematics means that given the joint variables, given my knowledge of how each rigid body is oriented with respect to the next rigid body or the previous rigid body, can I obtain the spatial location, both the position as well as orientation of that end effector, of the output of this kinematic chain. So that's the problem of forward kinematics. The problem of inverse kinematics is exactly the opposite. Given the position and orientation of the end effector, can we compute what joint variables we need to give us that position? So if we have more than 6 joints, you can easily imagine that there will be some redundancy. It's possible you will have multiple solutions for inverse kinematic problems. It's possible that more than one configuration will give you the same pose, the same position and orientation for the output link or the end effector. Sometimes even with exactly 6 degrees of freedom, it is possible for 2 solutions to exist. Sometimes there is no solution possible, and so on and so forth. So inverse kinematics problems involve solving nonlinear algebraic equations in the joint variables, and therefore it is computationally difficult, and in general closed form solutions are not possible. Forward kinematics, however, is for serial kinematic mechanisms, serial kinematic chains, is straightforward, because it just amounts to computing the rotation matrices and homogeneous transformation matrices for each of the coordinate transformations, and then multiplying them all together. So again, we compared and contrasted the complexity of both forward and inverse kinematics for serial kinematic mechanisms or serial kinematic chains and parallel kinematic chains, and discovered that in general both these are more difficult for parallel kinematic chains, because you also have these constraint equations that need to be solved, and are all nonlinear algebraic equations. So the mathematical intractability is more in case of parallel kinematic chains, but sometimes the attractions of high stiffness and low error and so on are so much, they outweigh these computational considerations so much that people still often prefer to use parallel kinematic mechanisms. For example, the aircraft simulator is actually a parallel kinematic mechanism called as a Stewart Go platform. Okay, so and tripods, for example, are widely used to mount cameras. Nobody uses 3 motors serially connected to one another through rigid bodies, etc. It's always the tripod that is used, and that's got to do with the obvious advantages in terms of stability and stiffness and so on associated with that particular parallel kinematic mechanism. Subsequent to that, having discussed that parallel kinematic mechanisms are in general more challenging from the point of view of analysis, we decided to restrict ourselves to serial kinematic mechanisms, and then we started to do dynamic analysis of serial kinematic mechanisms. Okay, so what we saw was that we took just some arbitrary rigid body in this interconnection of rigid bodies, and we just did a reality check of what was needed, what was necessary for us to obtain completely its equations of motion. And what we discovered was that the velocity of that intermediate rigid body depended on the velocities of all the other velocity, position, acceleration, everything of that intermediate rigid body depended on the velocities and accelerations and positions of all the other links before it, all the way till the laboratory link, the ground link. Likewise, the forces, the reaction forces at the joints of that particular intermediate rigid body, intermediate joint, dependent on the reactions of all the joints in front of it, all the way till the last joint. So we have to therefore execute this, undertake the derivation of the dynamics of this multi-body system in 2 steps. The first step was to do forward recursion, in which, given the velocity of the ground, which is of course 0, and the velocity of the first link relative to the ground, second link relative to the first link, and so on and so forth, what is the velocity and acceleration and position and so on of that intermediate link somewhere. So that was forward recursion. So do one and then get the next one, and so on and so forth. And then to get the forces, we had to do backward recursion, where starting from the last link, we obtain the reaction forces at the last link, use that to obtain the reaction forces of the last one link, and so on and so forth. So this was the program that we had set out for ourselves, and we had just got started with that in the previous lecture. So in order to avoid, you have to label these rigid bodies, right? So you would label them 1, 2, 3 all the way to n, and I would represent a general general rigid body somewhere in between. Now, if I were to write down the relationships of the velocity, acceleration of the next frame, next rigid body compared to the previous one, there will be lots of i's and I plus ones and so on, I minus ones and all of that, and I feared that it would confuse you completely. Therefore, I decided to take only 2 rigid bodies in this chain and focus only on those 2, because I have shown that here. I'm projecting it again. So I considered these 2 rigid bodies, B and C, to be some 2 rigid bodies which are connected serially, with B being behind C. In other words, B is closer to the ground compared to C in this sequence of interconnections. And given the angular velocity, angular acceleration, etc. of the B frame, what is the corresponding angular velocity, linear velocity, etc. of the C frame? This was the question that we were first trying to address. Okay, this is part of our forward recursion, and in this connection, we decided that we will restrict our analysis to 2 kinds of joints that might connect the rigid bodies B and C. One is a revolute joint, in which case the angular velocity in which case the 2 rigid bodies can rotate with respect to one another, and we assume that we shall align our z-axis of the C frame to coincide with the axis about which the rotation is permitted by the revolute joint. On the basis of this assumption, the relative velocity of the rigid body C with respect to rigid body B would be along the z-axis, so that's why it will be of the form 0, 0, theta dot. I will make a small correction here. I'll make this theta C dot, just to distinguish, just to connect the angular change with the particular rigid body that we are considering. If we choose a prismatic joint, we agreed that we will align the z-axis of that C coordinate system to be the axis along which these 2 links can move relative to one another on consequence of the existence of a prismatic joint, and therefore the relative velocity between the 2 could be represented as 0, 0, d dot, where d was that position variable, the joint variable, designating the distance between the offset from the initial position of the rigid body C with respect to rigid body B on account of actuation along the prismatic links direction. Okay, so again I will introduce a subscript C here, so that we are clear that this joint variable is associated with that link, that joint at the start of the C rigid body. Okay, so this was where we had stopped, and we shall pick up from here. Okay. So let us continue our analysis. So we have, a rigid a frame B. Okay, we know its origin. I'll call this OB, and then we have a frame C, and its origin is OC, and the frame B is of course fixed to a rigid body. So I can draw a sort of imaginary rigid body, that is between frames B and C. At the level of mathematics, what matters is how these two reference frames are moving with respect to one another, but it helps to imagine this rigid link for the time being, because it will immediately remind us of the equations that we need to use here. So what our first goal is to obtain the velocity of the origin of the C frame, okay, given the velocity and angular velocity of the B frame. Okay, so velocity of the origin of the C frame essentially refers to the velocity of this point OC. Okay, so if you look at this problem, you must recognize that here is a rigid body which I have drawn through these dotted lines, and I have a coordinate frame fixed to the rigid body, which is the B frame, and OC is some point on that rigid body, right? Now I need to obtain the absolute velocity of that point given its relative velocity. That is what I'm expected to do here. What is its relative velocity in case of the revolute joint? The relative velocity will be 0, right? This point OC will not move with relative to the rigid body if this joint is a revolute joint. If this joint is a prismatic joint, however, this point can move relative to the rigid body, and that should therefore remind us immediately of the formulae that we have already looked at earlier in this course, where we derived the absolute motion of a point on a rigid body that is moving either relative to the rigid body or fixed to the rigid body. This is all the problem that it boils down to, right? So a very simple problem, and we shall start off by writing down the equations to obtain the velocity of that point OC. So any questions about this recognition, this pattern that we have recognized here? So this problem essentially boils down to obtaining the velocity of a point moving relative to a rigid body. If the joint is revolute, the point is fixed. If the joint is prismatic, there is actual non-zero velocity of this point OC relative to the rigid body connected to the frame B. Okay, so what is the equation? We have OC dot is equal to OB dot plus velocity of OC relative to OB. It's a general equation, not necessarily specific to rigid bodies. Okay, and if I'm writing all these velocities, resolving their components in the B reference frame, I would need to resolve all these in the B reference frame for a reason, because ultimately my Newton-Euler's equations are written in body fixed coordinates, both Newton's equations as well as Euler's equations. So I need to represent velocities, accelerations, angular velocities, angular accelerations, everything in the B frame, right? So if I simply write this in the B frame, I just need to add this superscript on the left hand side to represent that all these are written in the B frame. Now for the case of let us say what is the expression for this relative velocity of the point OC relative to OB if this is a point on a rigid body? In general, of course, we know that in general this we can write this as the angular velocity of the frame B represented in the B coordinate system cross OC represented in the B coordinate system. This is going to be the velocity if that point OC is fixed in relation to OB, correct? Plus, if it is moving relative to the rigid body, there will be a relative velocity term, V relative of C represented in the B coordinate system. That's it. That's it, right? Very simple. No confusion here. What is the expression for V relative? The relative velocity of the origin of C with respect to B. If it is a revolute joint, it will be 0. That point is not moving at all. So the velocity, the relative velocity of OC with respect to OB will simply be omega cross OC. That's it. In case of revolute joint. And what is it in case of prismatic joint? We notice that the relative velocity of the origin C represented in its own coordinate system is, I mean, since we agreed that motion will be permitted only along the z-axis of each of these joints, revolute joints and prismatic joint, this will be of the kind 0, 0, dc dot, right? But I have to now represent that relative velocity not in the C reference frame, but in the B reference frame. How do I do that? I just have to use the corresponding rotation matrix. I have to write this as rotation of C relative to B times Pc relative to C. P relative comma C times this. So this is for the case of prismatic joint. Correct. So this is the first step. We have obtained the velocity. What have we done here? We have obtained the velocity of the origin of the C coordinate frame by treating it as a particle that is moving relative to another rigid body, namely the B rigid body, and writing down the appropriate equations. Okay, but we have represented this velocity in the B coordinate system, as is evident from that index superscript here. So we have to represent the velocity also in the C coordinate system. When I have to write down the Newton-Euler equations for the link C, for the rigid body connected to the frame C, I need to have all the variables, velocities and accelerations and so on represented in that body fixed frame, in the C frame, right? So I need to therefore have OC in the C coordinate system. That is what I'm interested in, and that is a straightforward task. I just need to multiply it with the appropriate rotation matrix, R of B relative to C times OC dot in the B coordinate system will give me the representation of the velocity of the origin of the C frame represented in its own coordinate system. Okay, any questions about this? Subhadeep Sahu has a question.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Sir,
Yeah, good morning.
I have a question. I am a little bit confused about the relative velocity of OC with respect to OB. Can you explain that?
Relative velocity of OC with respect to OB?
No, sir.
This
sir
one?
at the initial equation, the first equation you have written, V velocity OC with respect to OB, and then, sir,
so,
will you please explain this?
Why is that? So if you go back, if you have a rigid body, earlier, if you remember, I had used points P and Q. Q was a point here and P was a point there. And velocity of the point P was equal to velocity of the point Q plus velocity of the relative velocity of P relative to Q. This was a general expression. Did not assume that this was a rigid body. But then, if it was a rigid body, we know that P can at best rotate relative to Q, and if the angular rotation rate is omega, then the velocity of P relative to Q will be omega cross QP. Do you remember this?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Now, if the point P is moving with respect to the point Q, or in other words, in the notations that we introduced at the beginning of this course, we assumed a point R, which was moving relative to the point Q. Then the expression would be this plus the relative velocity, V relative. So this much is clear?
Sir, at the the last time you have written V relative, that is the relative velocity of the point R with respect to whom?
With respect to the rigid body, with respect to this rigid body. Okay, here it is with respect to the rigid body B.
Okay, sir, means I'm confused about you have written V R with respect to Q and and this term is composed of two terms, omega cross QP plus V relative. And so, sir, I'm confused about those two terms, VPQ and V relative. Can you differentiate once again, please?
So VQ relative to P is, so if what is V relative? V relative is if I sit on the rigid body, in other words, I'm moving along with the rigid body, what is the velocity of that point P or that point R, whichever one you want to call it. Okay, If that point is fixed to the rigid body, that relative velocity will be 0, right? If I'm sitting on Earth and I'm looking at Mount Everest, I will always see it to be at the same position relative to me, because I'm rotating along with Earth, right? So therefore, V relative in that scenario is 0, because it is the velocity of that other point relative to the rigid body. Okay, V of Q relative to P is the velocity seen by an inertial frame. So when I'm not rotating with respect to the rigid body, I'm an observer outside. Okay, then what is the velocity of the point P? Okay, the velocity can be written as velocity of the point Q plus that relative velocity, and that is given by omega cross QP. Okay, so this term I will not see if I'm sitting on the rigid body. Okay, this term will not be visible if I'm sitting on the rigid body. I will only be able to see this. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the expression, and then we need to have an expression for the relationship between angular velocities also before we move to angular acceleration and linear acceleration. So omega of c represented in the B coordinate system is going to be equal to omega c, omega B represented in the B coordinate system, plus again omega of C relative to B. Again, a simple expression. And what is omega of C relative to B? If it's a prismatic joint, then C and B reference frames cannot rotate with respect to one another. They can only translate with respect to one another. In which case, this omega of C relative to B will be equal to 0. Will be equal to 0 for a prismatic joint. If it is a revolute joint, I will be rotating about the z-axis of the C coordinate system, right? So the omega relative of C in the C represented the C coordinate system will look something like 0, 0, theta C dot. We talked about this. But we have to represent this angular velocity in the B coordinate system, because everything is being written now in the B coordinate system, right? And that therefore will simply be equal to R of C relative to B times omega relative comma C in the C coordinate system. And this is the expression for the revolute joint, which permits only rotations and not displacements between the two rigid bodies. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, there are no questions, but I must point out one subtle point here. We have directly written this equation, omega C is equal to omega P plus the relative velocity. Is this equation obvious? To answer that question, we go back to its counterpart in the for translational motion, which we showed here, right? So velocity of the C frame is equal to velocity of the B, origin of the B frame, plus the relative velocity. How did we get this equation? We got this equation by first writing down the position vectors. The position vector OC is equal to position vector OB plus, so this is the equation, right? I will just write it here. I took OC is equal to OB plus OC OB. This was the starting equation. So position vectors being vectors, and this was the equation that I got. And I differentiated this equation to get this particular equation. So this equation was differentiated to get that equation, and consistently we could proceed from that. So the rate of change of OC-OB, it was OC-OB could only rotate, not because it's rigid body rotation, and therefore we could get everything. So the derivation was straightforward and grounded well in our fundamental understanding of positions and velocities as far as translational motion is concerned. However, there is a small problem when it comes to rotational motion. We have written this. Intuitively, this is clear to us. But if I go one step back, the integral of velocity is this position. So of omega is angle. Are angles vectors? No. So even if you use 3 Euler angles and so on, are they vectors? They are not vectors. So I cannot write a vector equation for angles that is analogous to the vector equation for positions that we wrote in the previous slide, and differentiate that equation and finally get this result. I cannot do that. Okay, so although this appears intuitively clear, the way we get this result here cannot follow the same path as what we followed for position for relating linear velocities. Okay, how do we get this in that case? The way we get this is by starting with rotation matrices. Okay, so the rotation matrix of C with respect to A, for example, is equal to the rotation matrix of B with respect to A times the rotation matrix of B with respect of C with respect to B. We start this, and then we differentiate this expression, and rotation matrix of C with respect to A dot times rotation matrix of C with respect to A inverse, by definition, is omega C represented in the A coordinate system cross, right? So we use similar such definitions and ultimately show this to be valid. Okay, so the route to get to this equation is not as straightforward and does not take the same path as that for linear motion. I just wanted to make this cautionary remark. Okay, any questions about this? No. Okay, the reason, of course, is that the integral of omega is angle, but angles are not vectors. Okay, even if I have 3 Euler angles, I cannot add them up and treat them as components of a 3×1 vector as I would do for position vectors. I cannot do that, and therefore I cannot get this expression starting from some vector of angles being equal to vector of 2 other angles, sorry, 2 other vectors of angles, and then differentiating it and so on and so forth. That's not the way to get this expression. Okay, the next step is acceleration. We have to obtain the acceleration of the point C with respect to represented in the B coordinate system. What does this mean? This is not relative acceleration, mind you. O double dot C is the absolute acceleration of the point OC, but its components have been resolved in the B coordinate system. So again, I want to draw your attention to the subtle distinction between OC represented in the B coordinate system double dot and O double dot C represented in the B coordinates. The two are not the same. So here we are obtaining the absolute acceleration of the point OC, but we are choosing to resolve the components of absolute acceleration in the B coordinate system. Okay. Okay, before I do that, I think here also, now that we have obtained the angular velocity of the C coordinate frame with represented in the B coordinate system, we want to obtain omega C represented in the C coordinate system itself, because that's what's going to go into our Euler's equations, and that's going to be equal to R of B relative to C times omega C represented in the B coordinate system. So this is also necessary before we can plug in the equations, plug in these terms in the Euler's equations. Okay, so coming back to acceleration, what is the acceleration? Again, it's going to be equal to acceleration of B, okay, represented in its own coordinate system, plus the relative acceleration of OC relative to OB. Okay, now what is the expression for this? Again, please recollect these points P and Q or P and R that we discussed in connection with motion of a point R with respect to a point Q if this point R is moving relative to the rigid body, right? This problem is identical to that. It's just that the symbols are different. That's it. So what will that be? The acceleration will have Coriolis term, centripetal term, and the relative acceleration term. So straightforward again. Just that the symbols are different. The moment you recognize that this problem is no different from what we had discussed in the second lecture and the third lecture, immediately you will recognize the terms that I write here. Okay, what is that? So this rigid body B is rotating at an angular rate omega B. So there will be a centripetal acceleration omega B cross square. Okay, represented the B coordinate system, OC B coordinate system. That is the position vector. Earlier it was a QR, but now it is OC represented the B coordinate system. Then there is the angular acceleration term. So there is omega dot B, again representing the B coordinate system cross times OC in the B coordinate system. It's angular acceleration component. Then there's a Coriolis component. It is 2 times omega B cross, again the B coordinate system, the relative velocity represented in the B coordinate system. Okay, what is the expression for relative velocity? We had done that in the previous on the previous page. Plus, finally, there's a fourth term, which is a relative acceleration, in the B coordinate system. Okay, what is the definition of this term, relative acceleration? If I'm sitting, on the, I don't want to say if I'm sitting on the rigid body, so if I resolve the components of the relative velocity in the B coordinate system, the rate of change of those components is relative acceleration. So Krishna had a question. Krishna?
Position. Sir, is it not relative position instead of OC?
Relative position, is it?
Yes, sir. Matlab vector between Q and R will take, or you are taking C itself.
Oh, you are right. So, but my definition here, OC in the B coordinate system by definition is the relative position of the vector C. If you want, you could call this OB/OC in the B coordinate system. You could do that. But what I have done all along is I have not even looked at the absolute position of OC in the inertial coordinate system. I'm only looking at relative positions. So therefore, I have abbreviated that to OC in the B coordinate system. Okay. So this is by definition. You are right, Krishna. By definition, this is the relative position. It's not the absolute position. In that sense, perhaps I have abused the notation here, because for velocities and accelerations, when I write something with respect to B, it's the absolute position expressed in that particular frame. Here, it's the relative position itself. Okay. Yeah. So what is A relative? A relative comma C. C represented the B coordinate system. So if it is a revolute joint, there is no relative translation of the rigid body C with respect to rigid body B. So it's going to be 0 for revolute joint. And for prismatic joint, we see that A relative C in its own coordinate system will be aligned along the Z axis of the C coordinate system. So it will be of the kind 0, 0 DC double dot. Right. So in the B coordinate system, it's going to be R of C relative to B times AC, whatever we have here. Okay, where A relative C in the C coordinate system is given by that. I need to multiply that with this rotation matrix to get the expression for relative acceleration for the case of a prismatic joint. Okay, so if the actuator is accelerating, the separation between the two links for a prismatic joint, and that acceleration is captured by d double dot C, then the corresponding acceleration, relative acceleration represented in the B frame is this expression here. Okay, so we have now obtained the absolute acceleration of the point OC represented in the B frame. But again, when we have to write down Newton's equations, we are writing down acceleration in the body fixed coordinate system, or in other words, I am looking for acceleration O double dot C expressed in the C, and that therefore will be equal to the rotation matrix of B relative to C times the acceleration of the point OC in the B coordinate system. Okay, so now let us briefly review the milestones that we have crossed. We have obtained the linear velocity, the angular velocity, the linear acceleration, all in the C coordinate system, given the linear velocity and angular velocity of the B frame. We have done that. Okay. Next, the last part that remains is to obtain the angular velocity in the absolute angular velocity of the C frame, given the absolute angular velocity of the B frame and the relative angular velocity between the two. In the case of the prismatic joint, of course, the relative angular velocity will be 0. In the case of revolute joint, however, I will have a motor connected there to change the relative orientations between these two, and therefore I will have a non-zero relative velocity. Let us write down the expression. The starting point, of course, was the previous one. Omega c in the B frame is equal to omega b in the B frame plus omega of c relative to B represented in the B coordinate system. Now, what I am looking for is omega dot c represented in the B coordinate system. Okay. If I were to directly differentiate this equation, I will be in trouble, because again, omega dot c represented in the B coordinate system is not the same as omega c represented in the B coordinate system dot. Okay. This term here is, I have 3 entries for my omega c in the B coordinate system. Just the rate of change of those entries is this particular expression here. Okay. So that has to do with relative motion. Okay, more than absolute motion. This, on the other hand, is absolute velocity of omega c, but its components are resolved along the XYZ axis of the B frame. Okay, to get this here, I cannot simply go ahead and differentiate this expression. I have to first go to the inertial frame. In other words, I have to multiply the left hand side and right hand side with R of B relative to A, where A is the inertial frame, omega BC, and that will be equal to R of B relative to A, omega B plus R of B relative to A, omega relative in the B coordinate system, omega relative comma C in the B coordinate system. Any questions about this? Okay. So in which case I would have the absolute velocity of C in the A coordinate system, and A is fixed, unlike the B frame which is moving. A is a fixed frame. Okay, and this is equal to omega B represented in the inertial coordinate system plus RAB, R of B relative to A, times omega B relative comma C. Now I can differentiate, because I don't have that rotation matrix changing with time when I differentiate this here, and I would have omega dot C in the A coordinate system to be equal to omega dot B in the A coordinate system plus this, the derivative of this term here, and if I use chain rule, I would get R dot of B relative to A times omega relative comma C times in the B coordinate system plus R of B relative to A times omega dot omega relative C B coordinate system dot. It's not omega dot, it's that whole thing, B dot. Okay, and that would then be equal to omega dot B in the A coordinate plus R dot of B relative to A, R times omega B relative to C. I can write it as R of C relative to B, right, times omega relative C, the C coordinate system. I can write that for this term here, right, and then I would have to take R of B relative to A times, again this is omega B, this here is going to be equal to R of C relative to B, omega relative comma C representing the C coordinate system whole dot. Okay, and if I proceed further, I'll get this to be equal to omega dot B plus R dot B, R of C relative to B, omega, same thing, plus again I have to use chain rule, R of B relative to A times R of R dot of C relative to B times omega relative C, the C coordinate system, plus r of b relative to a times r of c relative to b times omega dot relative c, the c coordinate system. Now this we know, this omega dot c, this guy is nothing but 0, 0 theta c double dot, right? So this we have the expression for that. Now finally, if you want to represent everything in the c coordinate system, so omega dot, let us see if some simplification is possible here. Well, I am not able to dot. I think have I made a mistake somewhere? Just please stay with me for a minute. R dot AB. It looks fine. Then the last step is omega dot of c in the c coordinate system is equal to r of a relative to c omega dot c in the a coordinate system, and expression for that I have here. And if I do that, if I multiply and simplify, I will get this particular expression. I'm not able to do it in a stepwise manner right now, but here is the final expression: omega dot c in the okay. Why did I do this here? Okay, I'm very sorry. There seems to be some confusion between what I have in my notes and the way I'm writing things here. I'll first represent this in the b coordinate frame. For whatever reason, I have done that first. Okay, I will represent this in the b coordinate system, in which case I would get this to be the expression. And when I represent it in the b coordinate system, omega dot c in the b coordinate system, I'll get that to be equal to omega dot b in the b coordinate system plus omega b plus r of c relative to b times omega dot relative comma c in the c coordinate system, whose expression is given there. So these two terms are obvious. So the angular velocity of the c frame is equal to, angular acceleration of the c frame is equal to the angular acceleration of the b frame plus the relative angular acceleration, which is with the appropriate rotation matrix multiplied with it, so that you are representing it in the same coordinate system. So these two are obvious. But in addition to this, there will be one extra term, okay, which is basically this: omega b in the b coordinate system cross of omega relative c comma c represented in the b coordinate system. Okay. Now, what is the origin of this term here? So this term is clear. This term is clear. This, on the other hand, looks a little new. But for all of us who have been looking at rotational motion for quite some time now, I think we should be able to guess the origin of this particular term. We saw in the case of angular momentum also that if the angular momentum is a fixed vector in a rotating reference frame, in the previous examples, if you remember the case of the swash plate and so on, we considered the b1 coordinate system, which was rotating, of course, with respect to the inertial coordinate system at the rate theta dot z, omega z. And we found that the acceleration of a vector that is fixed in that coordinate system, such as the angular momentum vector, was nothing but omega z cross h, right? So we also understood what the origin of this was. Because this is a rotating reference frame, even though a vector may be fixed in that reference frame, the direction of that vector keeps changing because it is represented in a rotating reference frame, right? So similarly, omega relative comma c may be a fixed direction relative to the B rigid body. Okay, I may be that Z axis of the C coordinate system may be a fixed axis relative to the B coordinate system. But then any vector that is fixed along that axis, as it happens in this case, will actually keep changing its direction as the B frame rotates about in a certain manner, right? So the B frame here is again is a rotating reference frame, right? And its angular velocity is omega B. Therefore, this omega relative C vector, its direction keeps changing with time, and it's always perpendicular to omega B and omega C relative, and that change in direction contributes to acceleration, and that is captured by this term here. Any questions about this? Okay, I'm happy to know that you guys recognize this term. It doesn't come as a big surprise to you that this term exists here. It's just got to do with the fact that a vector that is a fixed vector in a rotating reference frame is actually accelerating, is actually changing, but not in magnitude, only in direction. And that change of direction contributes to acceleration, and that term is captured here. Okay, so this is the acceleration of angular acceleration of the C frame represented in the B reference frame, and to represent it in the C reference frame itself, we'll have omega dot C represented in the C reference frame to be equal to R of C relative to B omega dot C represented in the C reference frame. Okay, so with this, we are in a good position to proceed with our application of Newton-Euler's equations for this C rigid body. Okay, any questions?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yes. Tell me.
Sir, I have a question that you have written in the second last line, sorry, the last expression, it's the previous expression, that omega relative with respect to C dot. Sir, my question is it the same with omega relative C whole dot? Is it same, or how it came? Can you please explain that?
It is not the same. See, omega relative C dot here is the derivatives, is the rate of change of each of the entries of that omega relative comma C vector. Okay, that is what it is. Omega relative C whole dot is, what are you asking here? Omega dot? No, I think this should be whole dot. I'm sorry. But this is going to be the same as, this one. Okay.
Yes, sir. That's what I was asking. That
should it be whole dot, or should it be just no? It should be whole dot. Sorry, I think this should also be whole dot. Whether there's a distinction between whole dot and a dot put here for this particular vector, I'm not immediately able to think of the right answer, but it should be whole dot. I'm sorry. Okay. That then will represent this particular vector. It would be represented by this particular vector. Okay.
And sir, if you put dot,
that's also okay. Just a minute before you continue your question. That's also evident from the simplification here. You see, I'm taking the dot product of the I'm taking the derivative of the product of these two entries. So R of C relative to B dot is given by this term, and then I have this, and then I have R of C relative to B times this whole term dot. Okay, so I should not have put omega relative C dot. I'm sorry, it should be the whole term dot. So even if I were to follow the algebra correctly, I get the whole term dot. Okay, and that's just the derivatives of the entries of the omega C vector.
Okay, sir. So that's
omega relative C vector. Yeah.
Yes. Sir.
Yeah, I did not follow the algebra completely to its logical end, so that's why there was this mistake in notation. Okay, Rishikesh has a question.
Sir, that final expression, I think you wrote that wrong.
Which one? This one? The last one?
Yes. Yes.
Why is it wrong?
Sir, on both sides you wrote.
Is that right? I'll just write it again. Omega, because we have obtained omega C in the B frame, omega dot c in the B frame. To represent it in the C frame, I have to multiply with R of B relative to C.
B with,
Is that
yes.
okay?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
thanks for correcting. Okay. So now we have obtained accelerations. The next step, what we do now is therefore to repeat this starting from the first link to the next link and so on. So what we need to do therefore is to replace B, the symbol B with the symbol I minus 1 and the symbol C with the symbol I. Okay, because you have n links, I start with the 0th link, then go to the first link and the second link and so on and so forth. So I starts from 1 here. So from the 0th link all the way forward we go. So I will write down the expression for the general ith link. Okay, this expression may look confusing because of so many i's and I minus 1s, but I'm sure you'll understand what I'm talking about because of the first principles derivation that we have already done so far. So O dot I represented in the I minus 1 frame is equal to O dot I minus 1 represented in the I minus 1th frame plus V relative comma I represented in the I minus 1th frame, and V relative comma I represented in the I minus 1th frame is equal to 0 for revolute joint, and R of I relative to I minus 1 times Vi relative I in the ith frame, where V relative I in the I minus 1th frame has expression 0, 0 di dot. Okay, so whatever was dc dot now became di dot for the ith frame, general ith frame, and the velocity in the ith frame represented in its own frame, O dot I represented the ith frame is equal to R of I minus 1 relative to I times O dot I represented in the I minus 1th frame. Okay, so this is the velocity relationship. Similarly, angular velocity relationship would be that omega I in the I minus 1th frame is omega I minus 1 in the I minus 1th frame plus omega relative comma I in the I minus 1th frame, and omega relative comma I in the I minus 1th frame is again equal to 0 for prismatic, and it's equal to R of I relative to I minus 1 times omega relative comma I in the ith frame for revolute, and sorry, this is V relative I in the ith frame, not I minus 1th frame. Okay, omega relative I in the ith frame is equal to 0, 0 theta I dot. Okay, so I have just replaced very faithfully, hopefully, the symbol C with the symbol I and the symbol B with the symbol I minus 1. No difference. Okay, don't bother to look too hard into these equations. Just go back and check. You will find. As far as acceleration is concerned, so theta I double dot in the I minus 1th frame is equal to OI, not theta I. OI double dot in the I minus 1th frame is I minus 1 double dot represented in the I minus 1th frame plus omega I minus 1 in the I minus 1th frame cross square times omega OI in the I minus 1th frame, or the relative position of the origin of the ith frame with respect to the I minus 1th frame, plus omega dot I minus 1 represented in the I minus 1 frame cross is the angular acceleration part OI in the I minus 1 frame, sorry, represented relative position of the ith origin with respect to I minus 1 plus the Coriolis term 2 times omega I minus 1 the I minus 1 frame cross OI I minus 1 plus the relative acceleration term A relative comma I the I minus 1 frame, where A relative comma I minus 1 frame is equal to again 0 for a revolute joint, and it's equal to R of I relative to I minus 1 times A relative I the ith frame, where A relative I the ith frame is given by 0, 0 di double dot. Okay, so this is the expression for acceleration. again, we need these numbers in the ith frame, not in the I minus 1th frame. So omega I in the ith frame is equal to R of I minus 1 relative to I times omega I in the I minus 1th frame. That's the previous derivation. In this derivation, O double dot I in the ith frame is equal to R of I minus 1 relative to I, O double dot I in the I minus 1th frame. So that's another equation. So I have one equation, I have two equations, and then third equation, and then fourth equation, and then fifth equation, sixth equation. Finally, you have one more pair of equations for angular acceleration. So omega dot I in the I minus 1th frame is equal to omega I dot I minus 1 in the I minus 1th frame plus R of I minus 1, I relative to I minus 1 times what is this? Just a moment. Let me just check what symbols are used here. Just a moment. Where have I written this? So R of P relative to C. Maybe I'll call it alpha. Alpha relative comma I in the I minus in the ith frame plus omega I minus 1 frame cross omega relative comma I in the I minus 1th frame, whereas alpha term, alpha relative comma I in the ith frame is by definition omega relative comma I, omega relative comma I in the ith frame whole dot, that term there. Okay, and then the angular acceleration in the ith frame is given by the corresponding rotation matrix I minus 1 relative to I omega dot I in the I minus 1th frame. Okay, so these are equations 7 and 8. Okay, so starting from the ground whose angular and linear velocities are both 0, given the relative positions of the origins of the first frame and second frame and so on, I first obtain the velocity of the origin of the first frame, angular velocity of the first frame, then the velocity and acceleration of the second frame, both linear and angular, and then the third frame, and then the fourth frame, and so on, and thereby complete my forward recursion. As far as forces are concerned, that's what we would come to next. Okay, any questions about this algorithm, this recursive relationship with which we can obtain the angular and linear velocities of all of the reference frames in their own body fixed coordinates in a recursive manner? Any questions about this? Okay, so the next part is to obtain the forces. Okay, so again, let us consider a general ith rigid body. Okay, so the ith rigid body is connected to the I minus 1th rigid body, of course, and the I plus 1th rigid body. Okay, now for the sake of again simplicity, let me call the I plus 1th rigid body as rigid body D. Okay, just as I call this rigid body C, I have already obtained the velocity and acceleration and so on for rigid body C, and the one before that is I minus 1th is rigid body B. Okay, now I will have, there is a certain joint between C and B, and I will have certain reaction forces applied by the joint on the rigid body D, the I plus 1th rigid body. Okay, I will call the reaction forces as small f subscript D, and the reaction moments as capital M subscript D. Okay. Now, if I consider the free body diagram, similarly, I will have, small f subscript c and capital M subscript c acting here. If I consider the free body diagram of this central rigid body, the rigid body C, for which I've already obtained the velocities and accelerations and so on, what I notice is that if the joint applies FD and MD on the rigid body D to constrain its motion, okay, then an equal and opposite reaction is experienced by the rigid body C. So I will have minus FD and minus MD being the forces, reaction forces and reaction moments acting on the rigid body C, given that FD and MD are the forces and moments acting on the rigid body D. Any questions about this? Okay, just Newton's third law. Okay, and then here I will have FC and MC. Okay. Now it is customary to represent the reaction forces of the ith joint in the ith coordinate system. So these guys here, therefore, FT and MD are generally written in the D coordinate system. Okay, whereas FC and MC are written in the C coordinate system. So I'm putting a superscript C to the left hand side of these symbols. So these are the forces and moments that are acting on it due to the, by virtue of the interconnection of the some intermediate link C with the previous link and the next link. Okay, what other forces act on our rigid body? If it is in a gravitational field at the center of mass, I will have a downward force. I don't want to say downward because I don't know how this rigid body C is oriented, but it's always a force pointed in a certain fixed direction in space, and that's given by mi g vector. Okay, what the g vector is, I'll define soon. Okay, so we have now completed writing down the free body diagram for the intermediate rigid body, C rigid body. Any questions about this? Okay. Now, what are the equations of motion? We have Newton's equation, namely that MC, M subscript C, MC. Okay. Then PCM, C double dot, represented in the C coordinate system. So I'm writing the superscript C there, is equal to the sum of the forces acting on the rigid body. And what is that equal to? You have FC, which is one force that's acting on it. The other force is minus FD. But then FD has been resolved in the D coordinate system, right? Therefore, to represent it properly in the C coordinate system, I need to multiply it with the rotation matrix of D relative to C. So this is the first equation. So Newton's equation applied to this rigid body. Any questions about this? Okay, fairly straightforward. As far as angular dynamics is concerned, so the moment of inertia about the center of mass, let us say, is ICM, C, and of course it's going to be represented in the C coordinate system. That times omega dot C in the C coordinate system plus I center of mass, C plus omega C in the C coordinate system cross I center of mass, C in the C coordinate system times omega C in the C coordinate system. Okay, this term, as we discussed, has to do with the rotation of that body fixed coordinate system, body fixed frame. This is a familiar Euler's equation that has to be equal to sum of the moments that are acting on the rigid body. Now, what is the sum of the moments that are acting on the rigid body? I will have, of course, that moment MC represented in the C coordinate system, and then I will have the moment minus MD. But MD again is conventionally represented in the D coordinate system in its own body fixed coordinate. So I need to multiply it with the corresponding rotation matrix of D relative to C to get the correct representation of the moment, the reaction moment, applied at this location experienced by the C rigid body. given its representation in the D frame. Okay, then these forces also have moments, right? So this, what is this point? This point is OC, and what is that point? That point is OD, the center of the origin of the D coordinate system. What is this point? It is PCM, comma C. Okay, so what is the moment of this force that is acting at the C joint? It is this moment arm time R cross F, right? The moment arm cross that force. What is that moment arm? It's PCM comma C OC. It is that vector starting at PCM, ending at OC, cross, right, the force FC. Plus, there is another moment, and that is because of force here. That minus FD has a certain moment arm, so it's applied at a certain distance away from the center of mass, and that will result in another extra moment, and that's going to be equal to that moment arm, which is going to be equal to PCM OD, starting with PCM, ending at OD, cross times FD represented in the C coordinate system. So R of D relative to C times FD in the D coordinate system, and there'll be a minus sign here because because there's minus FD acting on this rigid body. So this is the sum of all the moments acting on this rigid body, and that should be equal to the angular some inertia times inertia matrix times angular acceleration plus this extra term here. Any questions about this? Any confusion about this?
Yes, sir. Hello. Sir, the term you have written now, PCM C and OC, that is the vector or the matrix?
PCM C OC, is it?
Yes.
PCM C OC is a vector. That cross makes it a matrix. It's a position vector matrix. We will write down the expression for that very soon. Okay. So PCMC OD represents a vector starting from the point PCMC and ending in the point OD, and that cross, written in this particular form, represents a position vector matrix that you would get, that skew symmetric matrix that you would get by taking that particular vector and arranging it appropriately at different locations in that 3x3 matrix. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, let us simplify the expressions for PM, PCMC, OC, and so on and so forth. So this is equal to MC, represented in the C coordinate system, minus RD, the C coordinate system, times MD in the D coordinate system, plus what is this vector PCMC OC? It is a vector starting from PCMC and going to OC. So do you agree with me that because PCMC by definition is the relative position of I have not defined it as a relative position, but if we simply define PCMC in the C coordinate system as the relative position of the point PCMC with respect to the point OC, then this is nothing but is going to be equal to minus of PCMC cross times FC. Is that clear?
It's not visible.
I pushed it up now. Is that okay now?
Yes, sir.
Because OC is the origin of our C coordinate system. OC's numerical value 0. So that PCMC OC is simply nothing but PCMC minus of PCMC. Okay. Is that clear? I assume from your silence that you are okay with it, or at least you want to postpone discussing this till all this starts to make somewhat more sense. And the other one, PCMC OD, is this vector here, starting from PCMC going to OD. And that's basically the difference between the vector starting at OC and going to OD and the vector starting from OC and going to PCMC. So that's therefore equal to minus of this vector PCMC OD is the OD represented in the C coordinate system, okay, minus PCMC represented in the C coordinate system cross times FD RD with respect to C, FD in the D coordinate system. Okay, it's just the moment arm, and I have just used the right symbols to represent this relative position and so on and so forth. Any questions about this? Okay, so we have therefore this is it. So we have the expression for the forces on the right hand side, and that's equal to mass times the acceleration. So this is Newton's equation for the ith rigid body. This is the Euler's equation for the ith rigid body. Perhaps I can replace C and D and so on with I and I plus 1. So we have therefore Mi PCM comma I double dot represented in the ith coordinate system is equal to Fi in the ith coordinate system minus R of I plus 1 relative to Fi plus 1 in the I plus 1th coordinate system. That's one expression. The second expression is I Cm comma I in the ith coordinate system times omega dot I in the ith coordinate system plus omega I in the ith coordinate system cross ICM comma I in the ith coordinate system times omega I in the ith coordinate system is equal to the moment Mi in the ith coordinate system, the reaction moment at the ith joint, minus Mi plus 1 in the I plus 1th coordinate system multiplied with the appropriate rotation matrix R of I plus 1 relative to I. Okay, plus, okay, or maybe minus PCM comma I in the ith coordinate system cross Fi in the ith coordinate system minus OI plus 1 in the ith coordinate system minus PCM comma I in the ith coordinate system cross R of I plus 1 relative to I, F of I plus 1 relative to I plus 1. Okay, so this is the backward recursive algorithm. Okay, starting with the nth link, we determine. So let us draw the free body diagram for the nth link. This is the nth link. Okay, the nth link has some F load and M load acting on it. There's an end effector or some such thing which is picking up an object or pushing against some material or whatever. So there's a general force and a moment acting on that ith link. Okay, and this is the center of mass of that ith link or the nth link, PCMN. Okay, and the reaction of that nth joint will be Fn and Mn. They're all represented in the nth coordinate system. Okay, so starting from that, we will write F. I think I have omitted gravity everywhere. I think that force expression, I'm sorry, I should have written gravity. I forgot to write gravity in the force balance. Let me try to do that. Okay, so sigma F here has to have gravity. Now, the gravity vector G in the 0th coordinate system, let us say, is pointed along the negative z axis. Then this will be of the kind minus 0, 0 minus G. Okay, G vector represented in the 0th coordinate system, let us say 0, 0 minus G. Then the forces on the right hand side will have an mg vector, so which is mc g vector represented in the c coordinate system. So I'll have this r of 0 with respect to c times g 0. Maybe I'll write it a little bit better here. mc times r of 0 with respect to c times g represented in the 0 coordinate system. Is this term clear for mass, for the effect of mass, for the influence of gravity? Sorry. Okay, I take it from your silence that this is clear. I have resolved that mg in the coordinate. I have represented mg in the coordinate system fixed to the body. That's all that I have done here. Okay, where g is given by this expression, that minus, that downward pointedness of gravity is captured by this minus g, which is written along the negative z axis. Okay, so now if you come back to this nth rigid body, I will have mn g vector. Yes, any questions? Mukund has a question.
So, sir, that gravity, sir, it will affect, sir, it will contribute to torque also, no? Some moment also, no?
No, we are writing everything about the center of mass, right? We are taking moments about the center of mass, so it doesn't contribute to moment. It's a good question, but since we are Newton-Euler's equations for a general rigid body can only be written properly about the center of mass, right? So we are writing it only about the center of mass here.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So for the just a moment. For the nth rigid body, I have Fn in the nth rigid body plus Mn times R of 0 with respect to the nth rigid body times G0 plus F load is equal to Mn times PCM comma n double dot represented in the nth coordinate system. That's the starting point. Okay, I know F load, I know the gravity. I need to determine the reaction, the reaction at the first link, and I can use this expression to do that. Similarly, the moments Mn in the nth coordinate system plus On PCM On. Well, I think this is minus PCM comma n in the nth coordinate system cross, okay, Fn in the nth coordinate system plus, if the location at which the load acts is at a distance L or something represented in the nth coordinate system, then this will be L represented in the nth coordinate system minus PCM comma n represented in the nth coordinate system cross times the moment applied by that load, which is F load, again represented in the nth coordinate system. Okay, plus M load. That's it. Okay, so this should be equal to the angular acceleration part. So I Cm in the nth coordinate system, omega n in the nth coordinate, omega dot n in the nth coordinate system plus omega n nth coordinate system cross ICM comma n times omega n in the nth coordinate system, not omega dot, omega n, sorry. Okay, so with this, you see, with the first equation, I know gravity term, I know the load that has been applied, and from my kinematic expression, I know how PCM comma n double dot depends on all the other variables. In terms of those variables, I can obtain the expression for Fn. Okay, if I know Fn, I can plug that into this second expression here, and I know how omega n and omega dot n depend on the other joint variables that my kinematic analysis forward recursion revealed that, and I use that to determine Mn. So now that I have Mn and Fn, the reaction, the loads at the bearings, then I can start my backward recursion and obtain Mn minus 1, Fn minus 1, and so on and so forth, all the way till the reaction forces and moments at the very base experienced at the ground. Okay, so go forward and come back and do this and solve for all of these variables, and then you will be able to get the overall dynamic equation of the multi-body system. Okay, so this is how you would apply Newton-Euler's equations for a multi-body system. And if time had permitted, I would have solved an example of a two-link manipulator where this was applied. But time is short. I want to start on an alternate way to represent this, so that illustration perhaps I can give it as a part of homework or something. It's straightforward. I mean, we have done nothing new here. You must recognize. I can understand that all these i's and I plus 1s and I minus 1s are source of confusion. Yes, mathematically they look intimidating and look very confusing. Our heads will spin, but physics behind them is very simple. It's just application of Euler's equations and Newton's equations to the ith rigid body. That's it. Okay, so there is an issue, however, with the way we have done this. It's recursive. I need to obtain the kinematic relationships in a recursive manner, and then the dynamic relationships in a recursive manner. So one of the problems that I have with this approach it ties into the complexity and how mind-numbing and boring it is, and how I have to crunch through a lot of algebra before I can get the structure for the dynamic equation, for the differential equation that the joint variables have to satisfy. That differential equation is very difficult to obtain, given that I have to do all of this in a very recursive manner. So is that limitation clear to you? So this ties into one of the other small parallel threads that we have been pursuing all along in this course, namely to find ways to simplify representation of equations. And our derivation of dynamics using the Newton-Euler formulation runs counter to our desire to look at equations in a very simple form. We invented vectors so that 3 equations could be written as 1. We invented cross product so that a complicated multiplication of three numbers could be represented in a compact manner. We came up with the vectors and matrices. We adopted matrices because 9 numbers could be packaged away into one symbol. And then we came up with this 4x1 vector for augmented position vector so that you can have a single symbol, the homogeneous transformation matrix representing positions. So all along you see this parallel theme that we have been pursuing, this determination to cut through the algebraic complexity, the dirtiness and the messiness of all the algebra, and to be able to view very clearly the physics of the problem or the geometry of the problem. We have all through pursued that agenda as well. And the present formulation of the dynamics of this multi-body kinematic, serial kinematic chain, I hope you agree with me, runs counter to that philosophy of representing the dynamics in a very simple form. What are we looking for eventually? We want a differential equation involving the time derivatives of the joint variables, theta 1 double dot, theta 1 dot, theta 2 double dot, theta 2 dot, and so on and so forth. A differential equation connecting that to the joint torques. I'm able to apply some torque on the motor at the joint 1, joint 2, etc., etc., and then there's some load that's applied. I just want a differential equation that connects these two. And I have to flow through all of this algebra in a very opaque manner for me to get the differential equation. And that's a downside to this approach. Okay. So the first issue with Newton-Euler formulation it is recursive. So it is good for computation. A computer will happily crunch away in a recursive manner the numbers and so on, and give me the velocities of the next link and the link after that and so on, and forces of the link and the link before that and so on. So a computer will happily do that, just as a computer will happily accept the 9 numbers of a rotation, the 9 direction cosines. But for a human being, I want to cut through that complexity. I want to see things in a more transparent manner. So it is not so good for us, therefore. Good for computation, bad for physical or mathematical insight into the overall dynamics. So when I remove all these reaction forces and moments by solving all of these equations in a recursive manner, I will get a coupled differential equation. I'll get n coupled differential equations, and the structure of that equation is not at all evident from the recursive relationships that we have written by taking the free body diagram of each of these rigid bodies. Okay, so clearly this is good for computation but bad for mathematical or physical insight into the overall dynamics. The second problem with the Newton-Euler's formulation is that we are really not often interested in reaction moments and so on. Of the 6 degrees of freedom that are constrained by this link of the, let us say, 5 degrees of freedom that are constrained by a revolute joint, for example, you notice that of that, all the reaction forces and moments that constrain along those 5 degrees of freedom are not really relevant to me. What I want is that one extra, that last 6th moment that allows me to change the orientation of that the next link with respect to the previous link. That is the one that I'm really interested in. But with this formulation, as you could see, I have to solve for every single one of those reaction moments and torques also, in order for me to extract from that mesh of algebra the torque that is aligned along that particular axis, about which I can actually execute my rotation or displacement as the case may be. Okay, so internal forces, moments need to be necessarily calculated for complete dynamic analysis. Okay, so this is what you get on your plate if you are adopting a force balance kind of approach, as we have done here. Just Newton's laws and Euler's equations are essentially force balance or moment balance equations. Now, the alternate approach to obtaining the dynamics of this multi-link system is to use energy methods. Okay, and this is going to be the topic of the next class. But very quickly, we can already see why energy methods may be attractive. If I want to compute the overall energy, whether it be potential energy or kinetic energy of the n, this kinematic chain, that energy will be the sum of the energies of every single one of these rigid bodies in the chain, right? So therefore, every single joint variable will already be represented in that expression for overall energy. Unlike here, in this case, where angular velocity and angular accelerations are only specific to the particular rigid body to which you are applying your Newton-Euler's equations. If I were to compute the energy of the overall manipulator, all the joint variables naturally enter into that expression for energy. So all joint variables are simultaneously represented in the overall energy expression. This could be kinetic or potential, and we'll talk more about it in the next class. The second thing is, you see, when you talk of energy, internal forces do no work, right? Because every action is equal and opposite reaction. So if the force is internal to the system, then these two negative forces will end up doing no net work. So therefore, internal forces and moments will go away from our equations if we adopt energy methods. Moments do not play a role, and that has a hugely simplifying effect. Okay, unlike with the recursive, you still get the same equations whether you use energy methods or whether you use Newton-Euler's formulation. You have to get the same dynamic equations, but the approach we adopt to arrive at the equations are very different, and as a consequence, this energy methods have greater transparency, greater compactness, and allow us to write equations in a very pretty form that are not possible with the Newton-Euler's approach. Okay, and that is important from the point of view of physical intuition and mathematical intuition. So I hope I don't have to build a motivation for that, because I have kept doing that at different stages during this course. We have kept inventing symbols, we have kept simplifying using mathematical new mathematical tools, etc., all in the interest of compactness, simplicity, and so on, so that we don't have to be bothered by the algebra and the complexity of the algebra when we are trying to understand the physics. And energy methods provide us with another such tool, this time for analyzing the dynamic equations of multi-body systems. And we will talk about this in the next class. This is called as Lagrangian formalism. We'll talk about this in the next class. But hopefully you have understood the motivation for Lagrangian formalism. So at this point, I can take we are done with the class, I can take any questions if there are any. Okay, so I see that there are no questions, in which case I think we shall stop the class at this point. I will log out now. Thanks a lot. Bye.